Okay, we're gonna do a tour of the garden. This is our sand pile that came in a month ago. We've been using it. This big compost pile is 30 yards. It came in yesterday. A lot of that wood and this container, big water tote. That's a 300-gallon water tote. All got moved out of this direction, and we cleaned up the mess that's been here for 5 or 6 years. And we have a little more work to do right across the front of this older shop. A little more work to do down this side, but that's not as critical as getting the garden in on time this year. The broccoli is, wow, not quite 2 feet tall. I'd say 18 inches though. We just side dressed it with composted steer manure this morning. Fresh off the compost pile. That truck brought it directly from the compost pile in the compost rows in Melba, Idaho, to our yard here in Boise. We still have to do some cleaning up along the Heritage Raspberries row and back there in the Bristol Black Raspberries row. We've got a lot of cleaning to do. Hasn't been priority this year. We finally got the water system all set up. Blackberries are looking great. We thought we had lost one. Back here, I don't know which one it was. It doesn't really matter. But I pulled out one of these little stems that didn't look very healthy. Here it is. I pulled out this little guy right here, and there's a 2-inch growth coming out of its root. So pretty excited to see what happens with these blackberries this year. They should take off and do very well for us. They've been side dressed in composted dairy manure. Look at the zucchini. Zucchini on this end and spaghetti squash in the middle. We have a ton. Then we got a couple of rows of July bearing raspberries. These fruit from July 4th to the end of July, and they're well established, very well established. The bees have been really busy. Looks like we'll have a huge crop of berries. The ones on my right are Titan, and the ones on our left are Canby thornless. Look at the berries. There's just a ton of fruit there. Still blooming though. There's still a lot of blossoms starting. Then we hilled up the potatoes, both rows of potatoes here. These are double planted rows of potatoes, and they're doing great. They're 18 inches tall, some of them, maybe a foot tall, some of them. And we picked 3 pounds of strawberries. Today's a little rainy. You can see there's probably another pound out here. And today is the 7th of June. So we'll be on our 4th pound of strawberries on these new plants we just planted the 3rd of April. Cucumbers are up. We had to replant for some reason all of our seeds. And the seeds we used here are the same exact packages of seeds from the same supplier. But the first planting didn't take. They did not germinate. I'm thinking, I just don't even know what to think happened there. So, tomatoes are growing. They're looking great. They're starting to bloom. The Polana raspberries are up 2 feet tall. We need to do some more weeding there. This trellis wire will be expanded. I'm going to pause. This is the Titan trellis. What we had before here was a 1x, very thin, narrow 1x2 probably, and it wasn't holding the trellis. Down the row you'll see shorter, maybe 5 feet T-posts, maybe 6-foot T-posts hammered into the ground. Every 10 feet or so there's a T-post to help support the trellis wire. But this end was just not working, and it would too easily break or bend. So this is a 2x6 by 36 inches long. This was a 2x4. I think the other ends are 2x6 and 2x4. 2x4 seems to be sturdy, but 2x6 would be even sturdier. These are on the July bearers. So on the Polana everbearing raspberries, we still need to trellis them up. And they're growing straight up. They'll be fine for a few days still. We have time to put the trellis up because they haven't started to fall over yet. It won't be long though before they're 4 and 5 feet tall, and then it'll be necessary to thin and trellis. So we get the wire up down both sides of the raspberries there. A row of paste tomatoes. Looks like we're missing a couple of cages. I'm not sure what I did with them. This is an Autumn Britain on this end of the row, and on the far end of the row we have a Willamette raspberry, and they need a trellis too. This row we have never trellised. We pulled out some Primark Freedom everbearing blackberries last year, thinking we would move them. Well, we decided to give them to some people, and then what came up last year this spring from their roots, we've decided to leave, at least to maintain them, because the projects we've had this year have been too great to be able to spend the time to move the plants around as much as we want to do. So we're going to maintain these. They're just coming up all down the row. You see there's a 2-foot tall one, a 1-foot tall. Got lots of Primark Freedoms coming up from their roots. And we can propagate those. We can maintain a planting of Primark Freedoms and see how well they do. We had them for almost 10 years. They fruited and fruited and fruited, but we just really never kept track. Same with the Willamette raspberries down here. We really never kept track of how well they did, so we're going to give them another year or two before we decide that we'll keep them or not keep them. The peppers row is looking very green. The carrots, I don't know if they're coming up or not. The beets are coming up. I can see beets. The onions down there are doing okay. The grapes have not been tended to since we initially pruned them. So we got some tying to do. We got some straightening, a little bit of pruning. The beans are coming up. The himbo top that we planted a month ago are looking fine. They'll just need some trellising. Again, we need a big 2x6 by 36 inch trellis across here. And we also need to, we're going to side dress this with steer manure like we will everything else. Composted dairy manure. We'll side dress and top dress everything in our garden now that we've got a supply of it. They were out for so long. And then after we do that and get rid of some of these weeds here, then we will go ahead and mulch the center of this raspberry row, which is planted 18 inches apart, to keep the weeds down and to keep the plants from coming up in the center. We don't need any plants coming up in the middle. They just need to be just inside of both trellis wires. The peas are coming up right down the row. You can see some green. The Suffolk red grapes are showing signs of leaf yellowing. So we've given them plenty of iron this year. I gave them an abundance of iron. And so we're going to need to experiment a little bit with some sulfur and see if we can sweeten the pH of the soil. It may not just be iron. That's what I've assumed until I gave it more iron than I've ever given them, and they're still yellowing, and that tells me that the roots of these poor plants are too close to the caliche level. And this caliche is a hard pan like that. And it's just very, very close right through here. As we come down the hill, the caliche level comes right out to the surface almost. And that makes the pH of the soil closer to 7 than the grapes probably like. The flowers are coming up. The melons are coming up. You see green all down the row. Our artichokes are forming. still developing. The artichokes are almost 3 feet tall. Okay, back over to the pumpkins and corn. The pumpkins didn't germinate down the row as well as they should. I don't understand that either, except that we've never ever, under this pine tree in the shade there a little bit in the afternoon, we've never ever had any luck, or real good luck, planting from seed. Transplanting might be a better option. Transplanting actual plants might be a better option. But they're coming up. We'll have a few. I might move some from this end to the center of the row a little better. The corn, one corn, let's see, peaches, nope, double sweet. Double sweet came up real good. Peaches and cream came up pretty good. The other two didn't come up at all. The Jubilee, looks like we need to replant. That won't hurt us at all because we'll have plenty of time this season to grow, 60 and 70 day corn. The early sun glow did not germinate either. I don't see any corn coming up down. Oh, there is one down there. I don't see any kohlrabi coming up yet. Florence fennel. Don't see. I do see some okra. Okra's greening up down the row. These are the original himbo tops, the original 10 plants we got from Norse Nursery. Are doing very well, and there's no trellis on those, but we may trellis them this year. It's sure a lot nicer to have a trellis holding up the plants so they don't fall over under the weight of the fruit to the ground. These are Joan Jay. Our Joan Jay raspberries are thornless everbearers, and they're very good producers of a very large berry. They're very nice. The himbo tops, they say, might be larger, but I can't see too much difference between the Joan Jay and the himbo top, at least on this. This is a parking lot road base style soil, where we put the two main rows of himbo top over here in between the grapes. That soil is very, very, very nice, and I expect those berries to produce much, much better berries than we can get here in this road-based soil. Once that's established over there by the grapes, then we will remove these himbo top, and we're going to take the entire 20-foot by 150-foot section here and set it up with wood chips above the road base. And it'll be a back to Eden style garden with the wood chips base. Composted wood chips will then become very nice soil for us to use for gardening in the future. And we'll pull all this out to set that up. And I'm wondering if we may even do that later this year. Where the pumpkins aren't coming up very good, I may just pile the wood chips down here and get started. We'll see. And the corn season doesn't last so long, so we'll think. 55 days, we may start piling the wood chips in here. We'll see. I've got a guy that would love to bring me some wood chips, so I'm going to pause here and go to the front of the garden again. Okay, about 5 years ago, the front of our garden was grass, just down to the sidewalk here at the side street. And we sprinkled it and mowed it, and it was nice. It was green. And we decided to bring in some wood chips. Wood chips. The neighbor had trimmed his trees, and we offered to let them pile the wood chips right here, and there were 4, 5, or 6 loads of wood chips, and they were deep. They were 3 and 4 feet deep, some of it, 3 feet deep anyway. And that has all composted down. And you can see wood chips on the front edge, but from about 2 feet, 1.5 feet or so back, it's all just soil now, mixed in with the native soil. We've tilled, and we're actually ready for more wood chips. That's how nicely it composts, and the soil is very soft. Last year we had huge watermelon, huge cantaloupes in here, and it produced very well for us. And I expect these flowers to do very well too. This was fun. We also planted canna lilies last year, and the canna lilies were, 5 feet tall and amazing. So this whole section could use probably 5-6 loads of wood chips. Then again, as I pan across to this side of our garden, we drive up through and around into the yard there, and we'll leave that road. But this 20-foot section from the side street needs wood chips. It needs some way to create a loamy soil on top of what used to be a parking lot, and there's not a lot of good ways to amend the soil but that, I don't think. And I sure don't want to haul all the soil away. That would be crazy. And I have too big of a garden to do the raised beds. We've not gone raised beds yet. That's not my thing, not yet. I'm in my early 60s. When I'm in my 80s, I might have to go to raised beds. But for now, I love just gardening in the native soil. We really enjoy being in the natural soil. Okay, this section right here are all jewel black raspberries. And that's a 6-foot, 7-foot tall cane growing. This one, this green one, is 5.5 feet right here. 5.5 feet, almost ready to tip. So there was a massive stump here until 2 days ago. I hauled it over to the tree recycle place. Our old plum tree, our old Santa Rosa plum tree stump, sat there for 2 or 3 years, and it's kind of been in our way, maybe even 4 years. I finally hauled it out of there. I also cut a pathway a couple days before that. I cut a pathway down in there. Now that sort of needs to be trellised back to hold it, but there's room to walk in there actually and the fruit is just loaded. Just look at the plants are just loaded with berries. Look at all the fruit in here. Wow. So this pathway goes down, kind of tees 4 feet before the fence, and I can walk both directions in the backside there. So now that this stump is not there, we can make a picking path through there too. Just sort of going with the flow of the berries. We haven't been very formal with it. Nothing set up with formal trellising yet. We may just move these too, since the soil is pretty dense. The berries are just a little bit smaller. That's what I sense, because I had these over on the other side in the better soil for a while, and they need better soil than what they're in. This is road base. Remember, this is a parking lot for a pump house. And so I'm thinking, even though the canes look good, look at the size of this cane coming up. That's probably 1/2 inch minimum, and I could find a bigger one. There's some smaller ones, but there's some really nice big canes in there. Yet the fruit still is a little bit on the smaller side. They're healthy plants, strong plants. I can transplant out, get the wood chips in there, and get the top of the garden in better condition than just road base. That'll be a big project for the next year or two. Rhubarb's been picked a couple of times. Okay, round the front of the shop. The greenhouse is closed for the season, and the blackberries are blooming. They're in full bloom. These are triple crown blackberries. We estimate that we pick 50 pounds of blackberries from that 10-foot by 10-foot section of blackberries. Now you'll see the greenhouse is just totally shut down. We're not doing anything in there right now. It's like I need to water my lemon tree. I forgot I had a lemon tree in there. These are our they're called better bush tomatoes. This morning we just put a top dressing of compost in each of these pots. We have 2 apple trees, a pear tree, an experimental berry garden. We had triple crown, satin, Chester, and Navajo blackberries, and let's see, loganberries. And then we have prelude, and prelude are the first to fruit. These are bigger, they'll be riper a week or two before any of the rest of the berries. In fact, I see a black raspberry, or a ripe berry back there. Today is the 6th of June, and we have ripe, whether I can reach it, a ripe raspberry starting to form along the top. It's quite an early raspberry, and because it's back in next to the fence and between the trees here, it's a little bit protected, and this fall we will have another crop of berries. So, guessing on the primocanes. They're not as strong of a crop as a regular primocane, but the prelude does give us a crop in the fall. Then we have a Reliance peach tree here. This is 3 or 3 years old, and it's 10 feet tall. And it will espalier with another Reliance peach tree right there. I think it's Reliance. It could be Red Haven, but I'm pretty sure it's Reliance. They're both Reliance. An interesting phenomenon happens every year with our peach trees. The leaves curl, and you think your tree is dead, and you think, I need to spray it, and but the curly leaves, they go away. I haven't done anything with this tree. The curly leaves, they just go away, and all of the regular leaves come out, and the tree looks perfect after a while. Today's the 6th of June, it just looks great. It needs some pruning. We haven't touched it since we planted it. But this will espalier with a grapevine, with that being 20 feet apart. We're going to experiment with a larger trellis here. And behind the shop back there with the trees we're planting, we're going to experiment with a tighter trellis. A lot tighter trellis. Now the pears, they look great. They're an inch long. We didn't get any cherries this year. I can find one. In fact, I see one that's turning red. But the frost got the blossoms. The frost hit us 4 or 5 times pretty hard. And cherry trees don't like that, so this old 1970s cherry tree is pretty amazing. But it hasn't given us cherries for 4 or 5 years now. Ah, I see one right there. It's hard to see. They'll be the biggest cherries we've ever had because there's only 3 on the tree. Okay, back here alongside the shop, a friend of mine gave me an apricot tree. But this apricot tree is a seed planted apricot tree, which means it's going to be a massive tree. You know, like they used to not make dwarf and semi-dwarf trees in the olden days. Well, this is not a semi-dwarf, that's a full-size cherry tree, and that's what that apricot would do. So I'm afraid to plant it. I'm not sure where to plant it. If we plant a full-size apricot tree, yeah, I'm not too sure I really want to put it in the yard, but if I did, it would probably be somewhere that wouldn't shade somewhere else that grows something, you know, like this east side of my yard. I could plant that big tree here, and it wouldn't shade the rest of the gardening area. That compost pile is probably 30 feet long, at least 30 feet long, and 20 feet wide, 15 feet wide, and about 5 feet tall, high. And where it's raining today, I didn't want it to get muddy, so I covered it a little bit. Yesterday was 99 degrees, or 92 degrees, I'm sorry, 92 degrees, and today is a high of 66 degrees. Huge differences in temperature in the spring. The 7th of June.